All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into it?
Absolutely. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be good.
So we're talking about something that honestly I didn't think would be that big of a deal, but apparently it's kind of a big deal to some people.
Oh, yeah. It can be a really sensitive subject for a lot of people.
We're talking about the Taiwanese flag and why it freaks some people out, particularly in China.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. Why is this piece of cloth so controversial? What's the history behind all the strong feelings? It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay, so before we get too deep into it, I got to tell you about this YouTube video we found. And honestly, it's what sparked this whole deep dive.
So basically, this YouTuber is walking around Chinatown in London with the Taiwanese flag, just asking people what they think about it. And the reactions are priceless. Some people are like, Taiwan, what's that? They've never even heard of it. And others are ready to start a political debate right there on the street.
And it made me think about how the international community gets involved in all this.
Supporting Taiwan can be seen as going against China's position.
Okay, tell me about it.
That's so interesting because it really shows how loaded this symbol is. It means different things to different people. And those meanings are often tied to some pretty deep historical and cultural baggage.
Right, exactly. So to understand all of this, we need to rewind a bit. Take a trip back in time to the Chinese Civil War.
Yeah, the war is really where this whole story begins.
So remind me again what happened with that whole one China thing. I always get a little confused.
Okay, so basically, after the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, you had two separate governments claiming to be the legitimate rulers of China.
Okay, so it's two siblings fighting over who gets to be the boss.
Exactly. On one side, you had the communists who established the People's Republic of China on the mainland.
Right. And on the other side?
You had the nationalists who fled to Taiwan and set up the Republic of China there.
Okay. So both sides are saying we're the real China, but they're ruling separate territories.
Exactly. And that's the basis of the one China principle. Both sides agree there's only one China. The disagreement is about who gets to be in charge.
So basically, it's like a super messy divorce where both sides still want the same house.
Pretty much. And for mainland China, this one China idea is super important to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, they see Taiwan as a runaway province that needs to come back to the fold, right?
Right. It's not just about territory, though. It's about their national identity, their sense of unity, and their legitimacy as a global power.
So, it's a matter of pride, almost. You feel incomplete without Taiwan.
Exactly. And to really understand why the Taiwanese flag triggers such strong reactions in China, we need to look at how this one China narrative is taught and reinforced.
Yeah. I'm guessing it's not like they're encouraging open debate about this in Chinese schools?
Not really. From a young age, most mainland Chinese citizens are taught that Taiwan is a part of China and that reunification is the ultimate goal.
So it's like growing up believing something so strongly that anything that challenges that belief feels like a personal attack.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why for many mainland Chinese people, the Taiwanese flag represents this betrayal of national unity. It's a symbol of this unresolved issue that cuts to the core of their national identity.
Wow. So it's way more than just a flag. It's this visual representation of all this historical baggage and political tension.
Right. And it's something that Taiwanese people, especially those who work or travel in mainland China, have to be really careful about.
Oh, yeah, because it's not like you can just walk around Beijing waving a Taiwanese flag and expect everyone to be cool with it.
Right. And it creates this really complex situation for a lot of people.
Okay. Well, before we get too serious here, let's bring it back to that YouTube video for a sec. Remember I was telling you about how some people had no clue what the Taiwanese flag was?
Oh, yeah. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Well, this one guy, he looks at the flag and goes, "Ooh, pretty colors. Is that a new pride flag?" I swear I almost choked on my coffee laughing.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You gotta love that kind of innocence, right? Just a little bit of lightheartedness amidst all the serious stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, but now I'm curious about what happens when other countries get involved in this whole China-Taiwan thing. It's got to be like walking on eggshells, right?
Oh, it definitely is. And that's actually something we're going to dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, stay tuned, everyone. This is getting good.
I know, right?
Yeah. I just want to give another shout out to Micky from MickyTolife. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.
There are so many people in Taiwan who see their flag and just feel this incredible sense of pride.
Oh, absolutely. For them, it represents so much. Their democracy, their unique culture, everything they've been through.
Yeah, it's like a symbol of their journey as a nation. One of the YouTube videos we saw, this guy was talking about how he works in Taiwan's semiconductor industry, who was like passionately defending Taiwan's democracy and criticizing China for what he called bullying behavior. Kind of like if someone came and tried to claim your house, you wouldn't be too happy about it.
Oh, yeah.
And he was so proud to point out the flag and talk about how Taiwan's like a global leader in making these microchips.
Yeah, I saw that one. It's cool to see how the flag can represent those achievements too, a sense of contributing to the world.
Right. It's like we're making a difference. We're Taiwan.
Exactly.
And this actually ties into something we were reading in those articles about how more and more young people in Taiwan, they identify as Taiwanese rather than Chinese.
Right. There's a real shift happening there.
Yeah. It's like they're saying, hey, this is who we are. This is what we stand for.
And that flag represents that, that desire for self-determination.
Okay. So we've got this whole wave of Taiwanese pride and this desire for recognition.
Mm-hmm.
But then things get a little complicated when we look at the perspective from mainland China.
Yeah.
And that's where this whole one China principle comes into play, which was a big focus in one of the articles.
Right. The one China principle, that's essentially the foundation of China's entire policy towards Taiwan. It basically says there's only one China and Taiwan is a part of it.
And for a lot of people in mainland China, the Taiwanese flag is like a direct challenge to that whole idea.
It's seen as a symbol of separatism. A threat to their national unity.
And you can really see that sentiment in some of those YouTube videos. Like, there's this one guy who was super adamant that Taiwan doesn't even exist as a separate entity.
Right. And it's important to remember that for a lot of people in mainland China, this isn't just some abstract political concept. They've been taught this narrative for decades.
Yeah, it's like they've grown up with a certain story about what China is and what Taiwan's relationship to China is.
Exactly. And anything that challenges that story can feel very threatening.
So it's not just about the flag, it's about this whole history and this narrative that's so deeply ingrained.
Exactly. And we saw this really interesting contrast in another video we watched. There's a man from Hong Kong who he said he really disliked the Chinese government, the CCP, but he made a point of saying that he separates that from his feelings about the Chinese people themselves.
That's such an important distinction.
It is, right, because it shows that not everyone in mainland China holds the same views on this issue.
Absolutely.
And, one thing the articles brought up is that the way the Taiwan issue is presented in Chinese media can make it seem like any display of the Taiwanese flag is automatically a pro-independent statement.
And that's where some of that anger and resentment comes from.
Yeah, it's like this trigger. You see the flag and you immediately jump to this conclusion.
It's a complicated situation for sure.
It is, and it's crucial to understand the emotional weight that this issue carries for people on both sides.
So on the one hand, we've got this Taiwanese pride and this desire for recognition. And on the other hand, we've got the one China principle and all the sensitivities surrounding that.
It's like two completely different lenses through which people are viewing the same symbol.
And that clash of perspectives creates a lot of tension.
Yeah, it does.
And the articles talked about how Taiwan's limited international space, the fact that they're not officially recognized as a country by a lot of nations makes it even more important for them to display their flag.
Because it's a way for them to assert their identity on the world stage.
Yeah, it's like saying, hey, we're here, we matter, we deserve to be acknowledged.
It's a way of pushing back against being marginalized.
That pressure plays out in so many ways, like even for Taiwanese celebrities, especially those who want to work in the Chinese market.
Yeah, they have to walk a really fine line.
They're constantly trying to balance their Taiwanese identity with the need to not anger the authorities in China.
And their fans in China.
And then there's that whole Zhu Ziyu incident that one of the articles talked about.
Oh, yeah. That was a crazy situation.
It's like a perfect example of how these cultural and identity clashes play out.
So for those who don't know, just to recap, this young Taiwanese pop star, Zhu Ziyu, who is part of this K-pop group,
right?
She waved the Taiwanese flag on a South Korean TV show.
Seems harmless enough, right?
You would think so, but it's sparked this huge backlash in mainland China.
Because it was seen as a pro-independence statement.
Exactly, and it shows just how sensitive this issue is.
And how easily things can be misinterpreted depending on your perspective.
Exactly, and when you tie those beliefs to national identity and pride, you can see how emotions can run pretty high.
No wonder it's such a sensitive topic.
And it's important to remember this isn't just an abstract debate. These different perspectives have real-world consequences for people.
And what about the role of the international community? What can other countries do to maybe help de-escalate the tension?
Well, the article suggests that other countries have a responsibility to support Taiwan's democracy and security, while also finding ways to engage with China in a way that promotes stability and avoids conflict. It's a delicate balancing act, to be sure.
Yeah, it sounds like everybody's walking on eggshells.
In a way they are, but the alternative, allowing these tensions to escalate unchecked, is far more dangerous.
I agree. Nobody wants to see things get out of hand, but I keep coming back to this image of the Taiwanese flag and how it triggers such visceral reactions for people. It's almost like it's become this battleground for these competing visions of the future.
And that's why it's so important to remember that symbols like flags are powerful precisely because of what they represent to people. They embody hopes, fears, aspirations, historical memories, and trying to dismiss those feelings or erase them is only going to make things worse.
So instead of trying to dictate what a symbol should mean to someone, we need to be willing to engage with those meanings, even if they make us uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging the complexity of the situation, listening to those different perspectives, and finding ways to bridge those divides rather than deepening them.
You know, it's funny, as we've been talking, I keep thinking about that British guy in the video who learned about the Taiwanese flag from his roommate.
Mm-hmm.
It was just this simple act of sharing and learning from each other, and maybe that's where it all starts.
I think you're right. Building those personal connections, fostering cultural exchange, those are the building blocks of understanding and empathy.
Because in the end, we're all just human beings trying to figure things out.
And we have way more in common than we often realize.
So maybe the key is to focus on those shared human experiences and build bridges instead of walls.
I like that a lot.
Okay, so we've talked about the emotions, the politics, the international implications. But there's one question we haven't really tackled yet. What does the future hold for Taiwan and its flag?
Yes. The sources we looked at offer some potential scenarios, but predicting the future, especially when it comes to geopolitics, is always a risky business.
Fair enough. But let's speculate a bit. What are some of the possibilities we might see play out?
Well, one scenario involves finding a way for Taiwan and mainland China to coexist peacefully, maybe through some kind of negotiated settlement that respects Taiwan's autonomy while still acknowledging the One China framework.
Kind of like a one country, two systems type of deal, similar to what Hong Kong had.
Yeah, that's been suggested, but it's complicated.
Yeah, and look how that turned out in Hong Kong.
Exactly. There's so much baggage and mistrust on both sides. Any agreement like that would take a lot of work, a lot of compromise.
Yeah, for sure. So what about the rest of the world? Now, what role do other countries play in all this?
The importance of diplomacy for other countries, you know?
Right.
They need to find a way to support Taiwan's democracy without provoking China.
It's a tough balancing act.
It really is.
But it's crucial.
Okay, so what happens if the peaceful solutions don't work? What if things escalate?
Well, that's a possibility we can't ignore.
Yeah.
Some of the sources we read talked about the potential for military conflict.
Right.
And that would obviously be a terrible outcome for everyone involved.
Okay, deep breaths, deep breaths. So is there anything that can be done to prevent that?
Well, the articles really stressed the importance of communication, you know, keeping those lines of dialogue open and clear, consistent messaging from the international community saying, hey, we want a peaceful resolution.
So finding a way to de-escalate the situation creates space for understanding.
Exactly.
Easier said than done.
It is, but it's definitely worth striving for. You know, it's funny, after doing all this research, I'm actually feeling a little bit hopeful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because despite all the challenges, it seems like there is this genuine desire for peace on both sides, you know?
Yeah.
And the international community, even with all its flaws, seems to at least be trying to find a way forward that avoids conflict.
I think you're right. There's definitely a sense that nobody wants things to spiral out of control.
Yeah, so maybe, just maybe, that little blue, white, and red flag, it could become a symbol of unity and shared prosperity instead of division and conflict.
That would be amazing.
One can dream, right?
We can always hope.
Well, we covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Taiwanese pride, the One China principle, those really complex feelings around the flag, the potential for things to go really wrong, and also that glimmer of hope for a peaceful future.
It's been quite a journey.
What stands out to you from all of this?
You know, I think what really struck me is how something as simple as a flag can be so deeply connected to people's sense of identity and their history and their dreams for the future. It's a powerful reminder that these cultural differences and historical narratives, they have a huge impact on how we see the world.
Yeah, and I think it shows how important it is to approach these sensitive issues with a willingness to listen to other perspectives, you know, even if they're different from our own.
Absolutely.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought. What can we as individuals do to promote understanding and peaceful coexistence, not just between Taiwan and mainland China, but in all our interactions? It's something to think about, isn't it?
It is a really important question for all of us.
All right, folks, that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. If all that geopolitical talk has your head spinning, we highly recommend checking out the YouTube channel Mickeytolife for some fun travel and drink reviews. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those conversations going.